The authoritarian mind. How does it get created? This is always something that's curious to me. I don't know if you're familiar with John Dean. He was White House counsel under Nixon, and he had the famous line, "There's a cancer on the presidency and it's growing," meaning the plumbers and the break-in of the Watergate. Also, Harriet Fraud, F-R-A-A-D. She does Democracy at Work. She's Richard Wolff's wife. She's a psychiatrist, I think, and she's delves into this all the time. And I grew up in a household in Anchorage, Alaska. My mom was an old school liberal, and my dad was sort of an independent. But he was my stepfather as well. So he was, and I consider him my real father because he married my mother when I was 4, and I know no other man in my life, and I love my dad and think he's great. But I could never figure out, and it's always, like I said, I've researched it, I've thought about it, I've talked to people that are authoritarian. Conservatives are authoritarian. It's because of the way they were raised. They're raised in households with male-dominated. The father is the unquestioned leader. He is the one that gets his own chair in front of the TV. He is the one that you don't question. And if you do question him, he will break your will. And so will the mom. So will the mom. The mom will follow the father. And this is, if you would like to do more research into this, go look up somebody that I had forgotten even existed until recently, James Dobson, of Focus on the Family. Focus on the Family was huge during the W years. They would go to the White House, they would do prayer lunches, all that kind of shit. And these people are authoritarian. And James Dobson, in his books that he writes for Christians to how to raise their children, and he makes it very clear, you need to use the rod to break the will of your child. Like your child is a slave, or your child is a product or a thing that you have to mold to make them behave. And so when children rebel against their parents in an authoritarian household, this can often lead to violence. And of course, we know from some great stuff that Derek Jensen did years ago about how the abusive family he grew up in. Derek Jensen is an advocate, an environmentalist, but he's also extremely astute at psychological observations, if you will. And so he would talk about how violence only flows downwards. And he stood up to his dad. His dad was beating him, and his brother stepped up, and his brother got it worse than Derek got it because he dared to question father. He dared to question the leadership, the system. You could even call it a system. The system that the father was always correct, and that the father, you never challenge the father, and if you do, you're going to get the rod. It's not just because you did something wrong. It's not just because it's not discipline. It's breaking their will. How many times in our lives have we seen people who we can say, Jesus, that kid looks unhappy. Or God, that family, that man is a total asshole. And his kids are being raised by a total asshole. And they're just little conservative robots. And the dads are always mean. And they're always, because they have created a system inside of their own homes where there is no such thing as democracy. There is no such thing as anybody else's opinions or any other ideas that are not what the father wants. And because of this, these young people seek out, there are ones that rebel, of course. There are many people who grew up in conservative families and become liberals or become progressives. But generally speaking, the Bible Belt, as we all know it, that's where Donald Trump's biggest support is from. That's where evangelical Christians predominantly reside. The Midwest and the South, right? So these people come from families where their father, looking for their father's approval, they submitted to his will. This sound familiar to you? Jesus Christ, God, the Bible? And these people are always religious, right? Because religion is about authoritarianism. It is about somebody at the top, a male figure at the top controlling everything else. I don't care if it's Islam. I don't care if it's Christianity. I don't care if it's Judaism. I can't tell you much about Hindus and others because I don't study it that much. But the stuff that I have studied, very authoritarian mindsets. These are the same people, ironically, that talk about freedom. How freedom isn't free. And freedom. But they don't really want freedom. They want a society that is rigidly structured like their childhoods. And because their childhoods were so father-dominant and violent in a lot of cases, and if it wasn't physical violence, it sure as hell was mental violence. It sure as hell was mental abuse. These people then become adults, and they have children and reproduce, and then this keeps going. Economically, some of this is economics, but not all of it. It's about time. Things right now are not good economically for working class and poor people. Some of even the lower middle classes are starting to feel this. People cannot buy homes. I heard a guy say the other day, a conservative say, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but a 1,600-foot house in this little shitty town they live in is $350,000. And he's like, what the hell is going on? My son is an engineer and he can't buy a fucking house. And this is what conservatism, this is one of the reasons they become more authoritarian rather than less. Because the times are tough. So now you're looking for strong dad to save you. When there is trouble coming up the driveway, you don't run to your mother. You go to dad and his firearms and his toughness. We see this mimicked in movies, in literature, all over the place. And so this is the same mindset, only the threat isn't another human being coming onto their land. The threat is economics. The threat is the change of culture, meaning we are seeing more Spanish culture all over the country, more Latinx culture all over the country. And these white males predominantly, not only, but predominantly, who grew up with these monsters as fathers and mothers who sat around and let it happen and have their own authoritarian issues with the way they were raised, this allows MAGA, this is what breeds the MAGA mindset. You've seen them say it. They want a king. They want a strong, white, cis male at the top of everything to tell them what to do. Because that's how they grew up. That's how they think. These are not people who, and by the way, these aren't people, psychiatry and psychology is expensive. It is not covered by most, I don't think any, healthcare plans, virtually none. And it is something that takes a long time and it's very important to flesh out, if you will, or get out the way you were raised and how your parents were and how you felt as a child, unempowered, and how you felt scared, and now they're adults and they've taken those feelings and just put them way down, and the authoritarian mindset starts to come out. We're in trouble here. And the authoritarians know Donald Trump and his people. It's not just Donald Trump. It's the people around him. They know that the authoritarians react to when you call, Harriet Fraud does a great job at this. When people use the word bad kid, it starts at home. You're a bad kid. Can you imagine ever calling a child bad? I mean, it goes into Christianity and how original sin and all that fucking gobbledygook. You're fine before in the womb, but once you get out, you're fucked. So you have to find Jesus. Having done nothing. But I hear, my parents never called me bad. I was called bad by so many other parents. All of them were religious and conservative. Nobody that was nice. It was always the dad. We had a Mormon asshole of a human being who lived across from us when I was a little kid. And he told my parents and the other neighborhood people, this is in the early 80s, that he could see a demon over me. That he could see a demon because I was wild. Because you can probably tell from these horrible videos I make. This is the kind of person I am. I talked a lot. I said a lot of things. I challenged authority constantly. I've been challenging authority since I was a little kid. I would stand toe-to-toe with my dad at 13, 14 years old and argue gun rights. And he was obsessed with the Second Amendment, so I would just argue with him about it. And he would get pissed at me, and he would yell at me, but he wasn't mean. We were just having a discussion. He wasn't telling me. My dad never said to me, "You're a bad kid." Never. That never crossed his fucking mind. And he was raised in an authoritarian family. His dad was military. They had buzz cuts. They weren't allowed to grow their hair out. My dad sort of rejected that, right? I said to my dad, his dad would have shit his pants if he would have, my grandfather would have flipped out if he would have saw earrings in my ears or he just saw my long hair. And my dad said, and I always appreciated this about him. He goes, I was 14. I said, "Dad, can I get my ear pierced?" He goes, "I don't give a fuck what you do with your body." And I was like, "Really?" I go, "I know your dad." He's "I don't care." He said, "You're the one that has to walk around with it, not me. Go for it. I'll take you." And he drove me and got me my ear pierced. I had long hair my whole entire life. I rocked a mullet for looking back at pictures, in the 90s, I fucking rocked a mullet for way too long. Way too long. But anyway, my dad never had a problem with it. He didn't have a problem with I listened to gangster rap music. I listened to aggressive metal. I listened to loud music. I never said one fucking word to me about it, never judged me for it, never did. And so he never broke my will, and neither did my mom, and they didn't want to. Now, they weren't trying to purposely do this, by the way. This wasn't a strategy. My parents weren't reading, Dr. Spock, how to raise. No. They did it because they knew deep down that this is the correct way to raise children. This is the best way that we can raise. I could not have had another set of parents because I am a product of my family, right? Oh, we all are. And my parents did a very good job at letting my sisters and I be who we want to be. We were also raised Christian, and my mom was a pastor. So anyway, I was never raised in an authoritarian mindset, even though my parents are Congregationalists, and there's that, they're not Catholics where there's purgatory, where if you're Protestant, it's hell or heaven. There's no other in between, right? So, and I was taught that at an early age, but the authoritarianism was never there. And my dad was not the leader of the house. In fact, my family, when my mother passed, my family kind of fell apart. We still communicate, we still talk. My sisters and I are extremely close. But my dad and I we've had some tough times over how the end of my mom's life. Anyway, and she was the straw that stirred the drink. And so she's not anymore. She was the center. And nobody knew what to do without our leader. We just didn't know what to do. And so, but we all knew, but this authoritarian mindset now, Donald Trump is playing to those authoritarian feelings of how you felt as a child when you heard the word bad. You don't like bad people. You don't like those migrants are bad. Let's send them to a prison that people die in. People that work the worst jobs for the lowest amount of money. Let's get rid of them for trying to make their lives better like your ancestors did in the 1700s. It's completely, but it's fine because authoritarianism, fascism, just labels the other as bad. The Nazis did this with Jews and gypsies and homosexuals. They did this with minority groups, calling them bad. And that has a supernatural connotation to it. Good and bad are supernatural words. How do you define if someone's bad or if someone's good? You can't. So again, wrap this video up. The authoritarian mindset they're scared right now. MAGA is the most fearful people that exist. They're terrified of everything, and they just want a strong-armed dictator to soothe it all away, make it better. And the authoritarian knows that this is what they are doing. They know it. So you can play to their fears, and you can play to their insecurities. And that's what Trump is doing. That's what Stephen Miller is doing. That's what Steve Bannon does. That's what they all do. So thank you for listening, and go look up Harriet Fraud, F-R-A-A-T, at Democracy at Work. Always Richard Wolff is the greatest motherfucker on the planet, Marx, genius. Go look them up, see what you think about that, and have a great day. Thanks for listening.